Welcome to Jewish Boy Calls His Mother. I'm your host, Sadia, and this is my mother, Ima. Hey, Ima.
Yes, I'm trying to make my face look as thin and smiley as possible because I know we're being videotaped now,
Great. Now you're being self conscious. Fantastic.
which I don't like.
It's okay, Ima. It's fine. It happens to everybody. So, in this week's topic is problems you had with Judaism when you were younger, like a teenager and young adult, and the solutions you've realized over the years. We talked about this earlier, but we were hoping you could. I'll start you off. You were talking about how when you were younger and you hung out with your home and your friends' homes, where they would have a kosher kitchen, but they'd eat crabs outside, in the barbecues and whatnot, and you felt that that wasn't something that didn't make any sense to you, or the idea that kashrus was something that you did for health reasons, and there wasn't any spirituality in that concept or in Judaism in general.
Right, yeah. It was very, very sad when I was growing up in the 1950s. Um, there was no there was no spirituality connected to Judaism. I mean, Chabad, yes, Chabad was in the United States, but somehow they had not spread, they had not really um, taken hold or had the influence that they have today. And um, there were a lot of misconceptions about Judaism. It was like everything was like very, very cut and dry. I told you in a conversation that when I was in college, I was reading in my history book about the emergence of mystical religions, and they did not name Judaism. They named Zoroastrianism, they named Buddhism, they named Hinduism, they named Christianity, but they did not name Judaism. And so I was having a conversation with this cantor at the time. He was a cantor at my parents' conservative temple. And I mentioned something about how it's a pity that Judaism seems to lack this mysticism that's so cut and dry. And he said, "Oh, he said, you'd be surprised." He says, "If you delve more into Judaism, you're going to find that it is very mystical." And I asked him, like, how so? And of course, he couldn't explain it because obviously he had never, you know, nobody knew, even heard of Tanya, even heard of like books about Jewish mysticism. They and also I felt like the Orthodox Jewish community in Baltimore was, how can I say, very cloistered. They really kept to themselves. I think they were afraid of assimilation, and so they, like your father, reminiscing about that, said that when he saw Orthodox Jews, he saw them either at the bowling alley or coming to his house to collect. But he says to be invited for a Shabbos, to be invited to see a real yontif, they did not do that. So I grew up. I I observed some Orthodox Jewish kids that were attending the public school, and quite honestly, I was so happy that I wasn't an Orthodox Jew at the time because I felt very sorry for them. The girls, of course, had to dress nicely, and no matter what the weather, no matter how hot it was, they had to wear long sleeves. They could not participate in a lot of the Friday night sports and the Friday night dances. That was totally out to them. They couldn't sing in the choir, especially holiday time, with all the Christmas carols and everything. And I was just so happy that in a way I could eat what I want, I could dress however I want, I could go wherever I want, and not be, quote unquote restricted. And a lot of people in those days, when they looked at Judaism, they didn't look at it from a side of spiritual fulfillment. They looked at it as a bunch of restrictions that didn't make sense.
Yeah.
And there was also the idea that Jewish women and girls, quote unquote, were subservient and couldn't express themselves or give their opinion, and and had to be like subservient to the men in their family, which after I became from found out was a total fallacy, 100% total fallacy. And you can, and when I look at like some of the movies and some of the propaganda that's out there, which paints Orthodox Judaism in a bad light. They, like I said, it's propaganda. It's they try to, portray the Jewish woman as being, like I said, very, very subservient, very mousy, and nothing could be further from the truth. I'll tell you a funny story that happened. As I was becoming from, one of the things that made me reluctant about being from, as I was, I was starting to keep Shabbos and Kashrus, and I was starting to go to Orthodox Jewish people in our neighborhood, who were Chabad, who invited me for Shabbos. But I didn't know if I wanted to totally make the plunge because I was afraid of that. I was afraid of becoming a mousy Orthodox Jewish woman that would be subservient, to my husband. And then I had Shabbos over this woman's house. This woman was hysterical. This woman was very assertive, and she and her husband got into some sort of argument at the table, and she laid it into her husband. I mean, she opened up her mouth.
What was the
and
argument?
I forgot what it was, but I said, wow, this woman is terrific. I said, now I see I can be Orthodox and I don't have to be mousy, and I can mouth off to my husband too. So many years later, after your father and I married, we were talking about I guess you would call it, they call it in non-Hasidic groups, the Kiruv movement. Of course, Chabad was the one that started the whole ball rolling. And so we were talking about the efforts that Chabad was making at the time to try to educate and to attract, non-religious Jewish people. So this woman said at the Shabbos table to me and your father, I never macarved anybody in my life. And I said to her, oh, yes, you did. And she said, who did I macarve? I said, me. And I told her that I was afraid of becoming from, because I thought that as a woman, I would have to be subservient to my husband. But then when I came to your Shabbos table and I saw the way you opened up your mouth to your husband, wow. I said, that totally macared me. So she turned to your father and she said to him, you are indebted to me for life.
So are these people still married?
Unfortunately, her husband died a while ago.
Oh, okay. He died. He died.
Very sad.
I was thinking maybe he got divorced or something.
No, thank God, no. They stayed married to the very end. In fact, she took care of him.
Oh wow.
Very end. Yeah.
Jeez.
Just the way I took care of your father.
Yes. His famous last words: "I love you very much."
I'm not gonna say what
it's fine. Let's go on. Move forward. Let's go. It's funny because
that though.
You were talking about religious mysticism, Jewish mysticism, and like I have a story from the Baal Shem Tov that I love, just about the perspective of Judaism and what it really means to be a Jew. And the story goes, a chassid of the Baal Shem Tov asks the Baal Shem Tov, he wants to see Eliyahu HaNavi. So the Baal Shem Tov says, okay, we're going to wait till Pesach time. And at the time of Pesach, I want you to get a wagon, strap it with all sorts of food and blanket and clothing and all sorts of supplies. And I want you to go into this far off village and look for this hut. And goes, sure enough, he's like, I want you to just go there and spend Pesach there, and you'll see Eliyahu HaNavi. So he went ahead, he went to this hut, and there's this poor woman with a child, and he showed up and he had all this food for them and whatnot, and was able to help them out with Pesach and get everything going. And then he had Pesach with them. And then after he had Pesach with them, he didn't see Eliyahu HaNavi, so he got up and he left. And he went to the Baal Shem Tov, and he's like, well, I didn't see Eliyahu HaNavi. He said, well, I want you to go there again next year. And this time with all this food and supplies. But before you show up, I want you to kind of hide behind the road and just try to just sit there and observe them. Then you'll see Eliyahu HaNavi. So he goes to the village, goes near the small hut, and he of course parks his stuff, make sure no one sees him. He goes behind the hut, he just listens, and he's waiting for Eliyahu HaNavi. And then he hears the son speaking to the mother. And the mother's like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know what we're going to do for Pesach. We seriously, we have nothing. And the little boy says, don't worry, Elio Navi will come like he did last year, and he'll bring everything in. And
Oh,
it's that story of like, what is Elio Navi? How do you understand Elio Navi? And that kind of
oh.
story that that I heard about the Baal Shem story, which asterisk, by the way, any Baal Shem Tov story, if you believe all of them, you're an idiot. If you believe none of them, you're a heretic. So just take it with a grain of salt.
I think I'm an idiot. I'm one of these. I'm one of these people. Such you can sell me the Brooklyn Bridge any day of the week. I'm sorry, I'm very gullible.
Speaking of the
I'll
Brooklyn
admit
Bridge, so I have this location.
it.
So that's like a Jewish mysticism story for me. That just for me it means a lot of what Judaism is. You know, we think it's this giant man in the sky, or we think it's this giant big rabbi with all sorts of powers making a giant clay man. It's just like it's the average person doing the average things and how much that shines. You know?
Exactly. That is a very beautiful story. The way you summed it up was really nice.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
It's absolutely beautiful. Very good.
Um, but yeah, so what kind of mysticism stories did you learn? Did you hear any stories when you were a kid? Any Jewish stories when you were younger?
Let me say, well, when I was in Hebrew school, we used to read the Katantan.
What's that?
Okay, it was cat. Got the cat over here is
Oh, he's
sitting
so
on my
cute.
lap. Yeah, there she is. Um, it was it was like a Jewish Tom Thumb. It was about this. It was a series of stories in a book. I forgot who wrote it, but would you believe it was published through the conservative, I guess the Union of Conservative Synagogues at the time.
Interesting.
And what we found interesting, your father and I, we didn't know it at the time when we were kids that it was published through a conservative Judaism publication. But they kept Shabbos, they kept Kashrus, they kept the Yomim Tovim, and it was quote unquote conservative. This book, I think it was written during the 40s or late 40s, something like that. And it was about a woman who had no children. She prayed to God that I please just give me a child. I don't care if he's no bigger than my thumb. And her prayers get answered. And she has a son who's no bigger than her thumb. And of course, there's all sorts of adventures that he has. Like she's making humantash and she's making shachmanis packages. And one of the shachmanis packages is going to go to a family who the little boy is in bed, very ill, very sick. And Katantan thinks that her chopping knife looks like a lot of fun to ride on. So he jumps on it, he starts riding on it, and she doesn't notice it. He gets mixed up in the mun, in the Homentashen. And when the package goes to the family and they put the package in front of the little boy, they're hoping that this will cheer him up since he's sick. And Katantan jumps out of the Homentashen, all covered with mud, and starts dancing and singing in front of him, and it makes him well. But that was an example of like one of the, it was called The Adventures of Katantan. I'm trying to think what other stories we had. We had unfortunately there were Holocaust stories. There was the very famous Holocaust story that they told us about Hanukkah with the men. I don't know which concentration camp they were in, but how they were very, very lucky. And instead of eating these potatoes that they gave them, the men saved the potatoes and they were able to squeeze out oil from the potatoes, and they were able to take threads from their concentration camp uniforms, and they were able to like the Hanukkah to make their own little menorah, Chanukiah, and they lit the Hanukkah candles. And this man who was like, I'd say the leader of the group, tells them, don't lose hope. You'll see. We're going to make it out of here. We're going to be okay. And the following Hanukkah was when their concentration camp was liberated, and all those men that were in that particular barracks that lit this makeshift menorah survived.
Did you meet any Holocaust survivors when you were a kid?
Yeah, I had some friends who I had one friend in particular who her parents were Holocaust survivors,
Was
and I don't know what their story was, but all I know is that my mother told me that they were Holocaust survivors, um, and they worked very hard. They had a store,
mhm.
and what I can't get over about um, well, when I got older, of course, when I went to Bay's Rifk, I met Nisa Miguel.
Okay.
You know, he survived Auschwitz. Everybody knows Nisa Miguel that he survived Auschwitz. I had a chance to talk to him.
Nisa Mengel?
Yeah, Nisa Miguel. Yeah, he taught one of our classes at Bay's Rifk, and I was able actually to talk to him. And what I can't get over is how these people, like not just the Holocaust survivors. When I was in Israel, the cab drivers I met, store owners, cab drivers, who fought in the 48 war
Oh, wow.
and went through, tremendous things. I saw in Crown Heights, I saw this woman who owned a store, a confectionery store, who still had the numbers on her arm.
Oh, wow.
And how these people can go through what they did and then get their lives together and become just ordinary, just lead ordinary lives. Set up businesses, um, raise families, and just ordinary people. Like the cab drivers in Israel, some of them Holocaust survivors, and then on top of that, later fighting in the 48 war. And after all that, hair raising, um, survival experience, to settle down to an ordinary day to day existence, I couldn't get over that.
I would think that's probably something they've dreamed of, and that's what they wanted. Like that was their goal, you know? It's like they don't want this, lack for better words, adventure. They wanted a simple life, but their life got thrown a few curveballs that they had to deal with while still trying to reach this goal of having, a spouse and children and raising a family.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like if you have that goal, a lot of times people just get tunnel vision and they just need to focus on that goal to keep them alive. I think Viktor Frankl said that, that's how a lot of people survived, was because they had a reason to. They had to have the people that survived were the ones that had a dream to go towards. And the people that died were the ones that felt they had nothing else left to live. And that was the thing that Viktor Frankl had when he was talking about man's search for meaning. But at, out of curiosity though, what moments did you have that you had when you were a child that you realize you want to pass this on to your children? And did you or did you not succeed in doing that?
That's a really good question. I often thought I wanted to pass on to my children the idea of not being defeated. Don't take a defeatist attitude.
Yeah.
And keep trying. Don't take a defeatist attitude. Don't be a victim. And also to be kind. I couldn't stand, everyone goes through, everyone goes to school has a run-in with with bullies at one
Yeah.
time or another. Unfortunately, it's part of growing up. And believe me, I had plenty run-ins with kids that were just, I don't know, they were sadistic.
Yeah, they're
They were
just
just
nasty.
mean. And I never wanted my kids to be mean. I wanted them always to be nice. As a matter of fact, you kids were known for being kind of on the wild side. But one of the principals, at whose office there was a chair with my name on it, commented to me. He says, your kids, yeah, he says, your kids are not the typical, from kids. Your kids are on the wild side. But he said, but you know what? He says, as wild as your children are, they're nice.
Yeah.
He says, they're kind, they're nice. He said, as a principal, he had a lot of experience with kids that were just rotten, just mean.
Yeah.
And he says, your kids in all their wildness, were never mean.
What about sharing a moment? Like, for instance, this might seem a little cheesy or silly, like watching a TV show that you loved as a kid, or going to a park that you loved as a kid, or singing a song that you loved when you were a kid, and being able to like share that with your children, or any other hobbies that you had to share that with your children.
I I remember there were some songs that I I gave over to you children, but I koshered them. Um, because they were more of a goyish, Christian bent. So I'm trying to think
Yeah, to
which one it
Jewify
was.
them.
Okay. Oh yeah, yeah. Let the sun shine in.
Yes,
That
yes,
I koshered that one because it's really a Christian song.
it
So
is.
they say there's a verse in it. When I forget my prayers, the devil smiles with glee, but he feels so awful, awful when he sees me on my knees. So I changed it to when I forget my prayers, the Yitzhahara smiles with glee, but he feels so awful, awful when I say Modeh Ani.
Yeah, that actually fits perfectly. Um, but
And then there was the one song. There's a Burl Ives song, which it's not really supposed to be for Christmas. It can be like a general secular song. That was the one about a father giving a gift to his son,
mhm.
and then the son giving the gift to his son. It was one when I was just a wee little boy.
Oh
There
yes,
was
I remember that
nothing.
song. Bop
Yeah,
when it moves, zip when it stopped, world and it sits still.
yeah.
I never knew just what it was,
What
and
it
I
was,
guess
I was
I
gonna
never
say.
will.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
somebody, there's someone who told me, oh, that that's it's supposed to be like a Christian Christmas song. I said, no, it's not. It could be any kind of secular song about giving a gift
yeah,
to their
yeah.
child. I'll tell you another, by the way, a very interesting song that they sing for Christmas, which is not a Christmas song.
Jingle bells.
Yeah, I was
Yeah,
reading a history of
it's a
Jingle
winter
Bells in one of
song.
my
It's a winter
music
song,
books. Right,
written by two Jews in California.
very funny.
No, I'm being serious.
Jingle Bells.
I think Jingle Bells was written by two Jews in California.
Look, Google it. But anyway, it said it's just a winter song. It's like a secular winter song. It was never ever intended as a Christmas song.
Yeah, I guess. Um, but
So when to go
we,
back to my opinions of Judaism
yeah, yeah,
when I was a
sure.
kid. Um, so I think that pretty much sums it up. Oh, I told the story. Did we tell the story about my brother-in-law and my Reform friends learning
Uh,
about kashrus and their temples? Okay. By the way, the Reform movement has changed a lot.
yes, it has. I
So
noticed
we're
that.
not, yeah, no, really, it has. Uh, I, I got a job in the 1980s teaching at a Reform temple because the principal there used to like to hire Orthodox Jewish teachers because she said they have information, they know what they're talking about. She says these, Reformed and conservative teachers that are coming out of the Reformed and conservative seminaries really do not know that much about Judaism. And so that was a few years before that. Every few years, the Reform, I guess there's like a conclave of Reform Jewish leaders, and they put out their platform. So the new platform that they put out in like the beginning, mid 1980s, was that yes, they are going to teach more Hebrew with an
Hmm.
emphasis on Hebrew reading. Yes, they are going to teach laws of kashrus, and yes, they are going to teach about bris milah, and they're going to teach about the steps of a Jewish wedding, and they're going to teach about Shabbos, with the idea that as educated Jews, you need to know these things, and it's up to you, what you want to do when you make your own decisions, whether or not you want to take this on. So I was teaching during that time. So anyway, but before then, when I was growing up in the 50s and 60s, I had some friends that were Reformed, that were going to, Reform Hebrew school. And I heard this from them. And then later, when my sister got married, I heard this from her first husband, who was raised very, very Reformed. And it was, oh, that the reasons for kashrus do not apply now. That the reasons for kashrus is because years ago in Europe, they used wooden bowls And so if you had meat in them, that the meat would get like in between the fibers of the wood and would ferment. And then if you added milk to that, so then the milk would mix with that and ferment, and it would create bacteria that was very unhealthy. But now we have glassware and we have porcelain, and we don't, have to worry about that anymore. And I heard this over and over and over again. Well, finally, when I was in college, I heard again the whole spiel from my then brother-in-law, and I said to him, "Hey, I bet you've never been to a museum, have you?" He goes, "Of course I've been to a museum." I said, "Oh, then you didn't notice the beautiful glassware from ancient Greece and Rome? And weren't the Jews keeping kashrus then?" And he went, uh, he got, like I took a sledgehammer
It just broke
through this
his.
age-old belief.
Yeah. It's like when you find out, like, I'm trying to think of something, but like, oh, good one for you. When you find out not keeping cholesterol doesn't mean you're eating treif, you know?
Mhm.
So it's kind of funny. Oh, by the way, Jingle Bells was written by a Confederate soldier.
Oh, I wish that were in the land of cat. No,
Yeah.
oh, by the way, Dixie was written by a Northerner.
Really? That's
Yeah,
funny. That's funny. Jeez
wish
Louise.
that was in the land of cotton. Old times there. You want to hear something funny? I had a friend
Yeah.
who who Orthodox Jewish, friend when I was already from, and she got married in Baltimore, and she had a lot of relatives that came down from New York for her wedding, and they did this probably just to impress the New York crowd. They actually played Dixie and danced around with Confederate flags. I said, "What the heck are they doing? We don't do this. This is not done in Baltimore. This might be done in Alabama or something, or Tennessee, but this has never been. They don't play Dixie and dance with Confederate flags and weddings in Baltimore."
Yeah, it was written by a guy from Ohio.
I guess they
Yeah.
wanted to make the Northerners feel like, "Oh boy, we're in the real South now." One of your sister's in-laws, when she first met me, she said, "Oh, you speak with a Southern accent."
No, it's a Baltimore drawl where we mumble everything and we say our O's really strong. Yeah.
So anyway, going back to kashrus. So I got to the point in high school when I studied biology,
Yeah.
where I appreciated kashrus for, you might say, health reasons. It made a lot of sense to me, like not to mix meat and milk, because I reasoned to myself, hey, a meat is a very complicated amino acid. And if you eat milk products or drink milk along with this meat, you're dumping one complicated amino acid on top of another complicated amino acid, and that's going to be hard on the digestive system. So I got to the point where if I would have something like with meat, at least I wouldn't drink or eat any milk products with
I just thought Jews had bad digestive tracts, and yeah, having milk and meat
it.
would just be like, oh, it's terrible. My getchkas, it's just a waste.
Now, if you want to read a really good book, have you ever read The Royal Table by Aria Kaplan?
Royal table.
The
No.
Royal Table, you got to read it. It is beautiful. It talks about the mysticism of kashrus and how we believe that everything you eat obviously becomes part of you and affects your spirituality and affects your psychological makeup, because it becomes
Hmm.
part of your blood and affects like your whole sense of being. And it goes to how it's shafted, how it's prepared, and that everything has a certain spirituality around it.
Interesting. Yeah.
Like he was talking about, and the animals, like, kosher animals are not animals of prey. That for the most part, they're gentle animals, unless you get kicked or chased by a bull.
Yeah.
But we're talking about, non-kosher animals have claws, and they rip their animals of prey, and they rip their kill up like
Well,
that.
actually, there was a whole issue with Turkey. because when turkey was discovered, they weren't sure if it was a kosher animal or not. And some of the rabbis went ahead and saw that a turkey was chasing a mouse, and they were going to determine that it wasn't a proper kosher animal. But I think it had to do with the feet. Like a kosher animal, the way its feet is set up comparatively to the way a non-kosher animal's feet, there's a difference between the way it's spread and the way it perches.
Mm-hmm.
I'd have to go back and
Yeah, like a
look
hawk.
at.
Well, that's a hawk.
Yeah.
Anything like a hawk or an owl has those talons that are
Yes.
built for ripping.
Yes.
That's the whole thing, ripping. Like tearing it out.
So what I was going to say was, so do you have any core, like, interesting or fun or delightful or good memories you had as a child that, like, you felt, you wanted to have and share that with your children?
You're not talking about the Hanukkah debacle, are you?
What Hanukkah debacle?
Remember, I mentioned it to you last week off the air, and you said, "Oh, I should have put that on the program." I said, "Well, it's not a very nice memory."
Oh, that no. I'm not talking about that. No. I'm talking about, like, I don't know. Like, I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example. Okay, this is something Tati, I noticed Tati did. First off, Tati loved sharing his TV shows he watched when he was a kid. Second off, he loved buying us toys that he remembered when he was a kid. You know, he wanted to share his childhood with us on some level. Did you have anything like that you tried to share with us, that we just didn't appreciate or notice, or we did, and it was something that you felt, was like your claim to fame, where you felt accomplished with raising us?
Um, mm, man, that is a really complicated question. That man, I'm
We got
trying
like
to
7 minutes left. It's fine. Take your time.
start talking. Oh gosh, what did I do? Well, you tell me. Did I ever do that?
I love the
Did
song. I loved your Motown songs. I love the Motown songs you used to sing. I love the Beatles songs you used to sing. You introduced me to so much music. You introduced me to wanting to play music. It's kind of why for me music is my life. Like, it literally is my life. It's just I can't live without it. Um, I guess I'm trying to think. I wouldn't know any movies or TV shows you kind of shared with us. I don't think you ever did that, but it was always like the lessons. Like, I remember being, a little kid and trying to read 20 Pesukim on a Shabbos afternoon, and that used to just drive me up the freaking wall. Um, and used to, like, work with me. But the frustrating thing, and this is like a boomer teacher thing, where it's like the kid's not getting it. Like, repeating yourself is not helping. Like, it'd be like, what's this word mean? I don't know. What does this mean? I don't know. I can't tell you. Think harder. Is it this? No, it's not that. What does this word mean? I'm like, you gotta help me out. Like, I'm on Duolingo right now, and what they teach you is, like, they give you the answers. You have to
right.
search for it, but they give the answers every time you go through everything. And when you get the answers, you retain the information better than just getting the answers none at all. And you're just trying to guess or put things together or jerry rig, But I
agree
don't.
with you on that. By the way, my teaching techniques over the years have changed, especially now that I give music lessons now.
Yeah.
And a lot of the kids I give music lessons to, are Orthodox Jewish kids that have a very, very demanding schedule.
Oh, yes.
So they don't have much time to practice, especially now I'm going back to giving lessons after they've been off for the entire week for Hanukkah recess.
Mm-hmm.
And so all my students needed a review of exactly what the notes are. And so I have these music flashcards, and I just go ahead and I just tell them, I said, this is a C, this is a D, and I put it in front of them. Now, what is this? Then we review, and then I add more, and I add more. Like, we review gradually, little by little by little by little, until they said now that at the end of the lesson, they've told me that this was very constructive, that it really helped them to remember the notes. But at first I started by having them guess, and I realized I can't do that. I've got to just give them the answer and then review it and then repeat it. And then later on, they're able to memorize it much better.
Yeah. Forced memorization where it's like, just remember. It just doesn't work. It doesn't,
No.
I don't think you don't get the results that you really are looking for.
The best way is to give the information and repeat the information and then ask them to repeat it back to you a few times. That's much more effective. What would irritate me when I was in college, we used to get these professors where you would ask them a question, saying like something simple. Let's say like not where was the Battle of Stalingrad. Like who was the last
composer out of 1812's overture,
yeah, something like that. It's something. And instead of just simply answering your question and giving the information, they would look at you and go, "You mean you don't know that was the composer of the 1812? If I knew, I wouldn't be asking you."
It's these egotistical people that are self-centered, self-righteous, and think that they're the best thing to God, whatever. Yeah, and I've dealt with those kind of professors as well. I've had one, and he was just a disgusting train wreck. I hope whatever. But speaking of teachers, what were there any inspirational good teachers you had that you felt like you wanted to emulate when you became a teacher?
Well, it didn't occur to me till actually a few weeks ago how, I'm working in a preschool setting. I bring my piano, I have my piano there in school, my electric keyboard. And I've always tried to, I play for the children. I've got my violin there too. I've been taking up my violin, and these are like little babies or little kids, or some of them are growing into toddlers now. And it occurred to me, my first two teachers, both my kindergarten teacher and my first grade teacher, played piano.
Interesting.
And when I was growing up, all the preschool rooms had pianos. There were pianos all over the school. The preschool teachers played them for the class, and my first grade teacher also had a piano in her room, and she played for us. And then it occurred to me, I said, I never realized how unconsciously I've emulated those two women by bringing music into the preschool setting where I'm working.
Yeah, and that's why I think
in fact, I was very surprised when one of my friends, I think she was in a different school, I'm at the same school, when she told me, that her kindergarten teacher doesn't play piano, she just puts on records for them. I go, what? I was shocked. I said, because to me, and all kindergarten teachers played piano. I couldn't imagine a kindergarten teacher or first grade teacher that didn't play piano and didn't have it in the room and play it for the kids.
Yeah, I mean that's what I was talking about, like something that like you inspire, like you're not saying you did this on purpose, but it's like a subconscious inspiration, where you look back at your life and you're like, oh, I really did do that. Like, did your mother like listen to like old music that you really enjoy now, like you still listen to?
The funny thing was, my mother, the big rock and roll music station during the 1950s and 60s was a station called WCAO. And my mother had WC was called a top 40 station.
Mm-hmm.
The top 40 stations played the top, just like that, was the 40 most popular songs in the country at the time. And they had ratings. It was if it was very popular, it was number one, little less number two, little less number three. And you saw songs that would climb the charts and make number one. And that's all you heard on the radio for weeks and weeks and weeks. And then gradually you heard less of it. And like people eventually got tired of it and heard less of it and less of it, and then new songs would come and take its place. Well, I remember one time when I was a teenager was when I really got involved in classical music. I mean, I would go to the library. I would take out all of Beethoven's 9 symphonies, by the NBC Orchestra conducted by Toscanini. That was my favorite.